and he has to respect the parameters of the Constitution, because that is the office which all of us are running for today.
Given your view of the significant but limited powers of the presidency, what assurance can you give that you would exercise independence in exercising your custodial powers?
I think that this is something which the president will have to do. He has to exercise his mind with regard to the, for example, with regard to the custodial authorities. He has to decide whether the request of, for example, of the government to use part of reserves should be entertained or not. This is a very difficult question. It requires a president, in my view, who has a deep knowledge of the global economic system, what is going to happen, what is likely to happen, how the use of the reserves can be justified. And the president has to be very careful about that, because he is there to protect the reserves. It should not be used for other purposes than in the most extraordinary circumstances.
Mr. Tan Jee Say, you've talked about reserves. I'm picking up this point on reserves. First, you said the president shouldn't be done, and secondly, that the reserves should be used for other things. You talked about pension schemes and so on. Under what circumstances would you veto the recommendation of a cabinet on the drawdown of reserves?
I have been misquoted on that matter. I was asked about what would the president do when he's given a request to make a drawdown on reserves, and I want to check on that request what is inside it, and I want to make sure that when the request comes, the users of that reserve should be more balanced and more broad-based. For example, if the reserves are to be used to help businesses, I want to make sure in an economic downturn or a challenge, I want to make sure that it should be, the needs of the people should be covered as well. Now, I want to do this in a consultative way. That means it is not exercising of the veto. The veto should be done only at the last resort. So I will give my views to the Prime Minister, and I believe that we should be constructive and consultative, and that we should find better arrangements for the use of the reserves.
I'd like to move on now to a question on the integrity of the public service, Prof.
Maybe I will begin with Dr. Tan Jee Say. But it should be clear to all of you that although we are asking the question to one person, the rest of you can also join in. Yeah?
Yes, good.
So to Dr. Tan Jee Say, one of the most important functions and powers of the president is to protect the integrity of the public service.
Yes.
So my question to you is, under what conditions, on what grounds would you veto a proposed appointment?
I think as a president, I value certain, I will look for certain values in that particular gentleman to be appointed. Apart from his integrity, his ability, I think I also want to see whether how people-oriented is he. Because the policies that these people are going to implement affect Singaporeans at large. So I really want to see how connected is he with the ground. Or is he just a man with a lot of intellect? But you may be very bright. But at the end of the day, if I find that this particular gentleman has some shortcomings in the area of connecting with the ground, I will have to ask questions. Why is he being chosen? I think most of us know these people who come on board are actually very qualified. But again, I'd like to stress the importance of being people-oriented.
Thank you. You know that in carrying out this particular function, the president has to consult the Council of Presidential Advisors.
Yes.
So I assume that if you were the president, you would regularly consult the council.
I think I should.
And take its advice?
Yes, I would do that because they are all appointed by by Prime Minister, by Chief Justice, and also my own men. So you got to respect that. If they have been appointed, they should be people of very, very good capabilities. And I would definitely consult them because I don't want to make decisions just on my own.
Thank you.
Can Anybody else take an interaction on this one?
Dr. Tan, please.
We have a first-rate public service in Singapore. This has been drawn admiration from around the world. And it is one of the most important jobs of the President to protect the integrity of the public service, to make sure the right people are appointed there. I think that with regard to any appointment which comes up to the President, he has to consult the Council of President Advisors, and he has to give serious consideration. There must be very serious grounds before the President should veto the appointment of any body who has been proposed to work in the public sector. That is a very important decision which the President should consider very, very carefully with the advice of the CPA.
Thank you. Anybody else?
It's okay.
Will you... Mr. Tan, can I go first, please?
On that matter, I would certainly like to invite the candidates to have a discussion. I want to check about what are his values. And I want to see whether he holds the values of honesty, fairness, and a sense of public service. And I will probably want to influence him that these values are very important.
Thank you.
Similarly, I think I would subject the appointees, the recommendations of the government, to a fair bit of scrutiny. We are talking about very senior appointments, and we must do justice to the powers of the President. So we should not take a flippant attitude that this is from the government's recommendation, we accept it without question. I intend to have a system of intense scrutiny and to make public service a key criteria to take up the job of these organizations, these top appointments, and that they are not motivated by money, but motivated by public service. And surely, of course, that I want to make sure that they are Singaporeans and not foreigners.
Thank you.
You have said that the President can, in your view, act as a check on the government when it crosses the line on any issue. We have had 3 distinguished men serving in this office who have exercised the powers of the elected presidency over the past 20 years. President Wee Kim Wee, President Ong Teng Cheong, and President Nathan. What precedents can you cite in any of these presidencies to justify your view of the President's powers?
Well, I think they have been good presidents. They have done good jobs. And, but I think that there comes a time when you, especially in the last few years, when society has been quite divided. And crossing the line means having the courage to take corrective action, to be accountable for actions.
Where in the Constitution do you find the authority to do this?
Well, this is where the moral power of the President comes in. Not a stated power, as stated, specified in 5 areas, but the moral power.
Moral power to check on the government when it crosses the line as defined by you.
That's right. When it divides the people. When it divides the people. When no action is taken by the government for serious lapse of security, like the escape of Mas Selamat.
Where does the President derive the authority to act in that fashion?
As I said, it's a moral power. It is not an executive power specified. But I think the government, there have been a lot of calls for certain action to be taken following the escape of Mas Selamat, but nothing has been done.
Dr. Tan, you have said that if the views of some of your opponents were to prevail on the presidency, there will be a serious risk of a clash between the President and the government. Do you see that this is one of those?
Yes, I see there could be possible clashes because the President has quite clearly defined roles. But the 2 roles that most of us are very familiar, that is the financial side and the appointments of civil servants. But there are matters like your day-to-day politics. I think we must move away from that. Because the day-to-day politics should be handled by the executive, that is Parliament. And Parliament will come to the President for assent of the bills and also for requests to dip into your reserve. Yes, that is my role. I can see it very clearly. As the President, that is my role. But I'm not going to tell the President how to run the transport system, how to build the homes of Singapore. I want to make sure that when they are doing all this, whether they dip into the reserve, and if they want to dip into the reserve, I want good reasons why they want to dip into the reserves.
Mr. Tan Kim Lian, yes.
Yes, I would like to say on that. I see the President as playing a very important role in looking after the best interests of Singaporeans without interfering with the government. And we have to uphold the values embedded in our national pledge. Our national pledge is to promote equality and justice and to achieve happiness, prosperity and progress for our nation and for our people. And if the people are not having a satisfactory life, if they find that life is difficult, I think the President has got a role to convey this to the government. But in doing so,
in private or in public?
In whichever manner is appropriate. And of course,
let me quote to you what Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, one of the chief architects of the constitutional provisions creating the elected presidency, said in 1999, under this constitution, the president has to act on the advice of the government. He can't make speeches against the government. The president cannot act against the wishes of the government, full stop, except when the government wants to do things which he's entitled to vote.
Well, I respect that statement, and I certainly would like to convey the sentiments of the people in the areas embedded in our national pledge to the government in any appropriate manner. I would prefer private because that's best to get better solutions. And I think the government would also want to reciprocate because it's all in the interest of a harmonious working relationship.
There is one very important prescribed role of the President, and that's with respect to the detentions under the ISA. Prof, would you like to
I think there's some misunderstanding about the power of the President, and I'd like to just explain how I understand the Constitution. There is an advisory committee set up under the Internal Security Act. If the advisory committee recommends that a detainee be released and the cabinet does not agree, only in such a circumstance is the President empowered to order the release of the detainee, and in no other circumstances. I thought, just make it clear, in case any of you...
No, I agree.
You agree? You agree?
I agree.
Well, let's turn to... Okay, let's turn the discussion
Can
to...
I go back to the question about clash between the President and government? I think it is an important point. We are all mature adults. We have disagreement over views. We should not see disagreement over views as a case of clashing. The first approach will always be, for me, is to have a private discussion with the Prime Minister. There is no doubt about it. And there is no intention to clash because our interests are all for Singapore. We do not have personal agenda to pursue. And let's be adults. If there are differences of opinion, let's air them out. Between us, as mature, no, not yet. But if it is necessary for public on issues of absolute conscience, then why not air out in public?
Where would your authority be from the Constitution?
Well, I think I would discuss with the Prime Minister first about, for example, issues of casinos. These are issues of conscience which ministers and MPs debated on in Parliament. And I would request that I be involved. If he would like, well, only if he requests, then maybe I can be involved.
I think under the Constitution,
yes,
you can, in your regular meetings with the Prime Minister, convey your view, your advice. But in public, I think the Constitution constrains you. Not.
I remember, yes,
Sorry.
Professor Koh, you mentioned a quotation from Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. What year was it made?
1999. But I can give you similar quotations from Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong when he moved the bill. I can give you similar quotations from the White Paper. It is very consistent. But the Constitution says very clearly the President shall act in accordance with the advice of the Cabinet.
Was there a quotation, a speech by Mr. Goh Chok Tong sometime also in 1999 that it is natural for the President to disagree with the government? It was